my name is Li Jingjing. I'm a journalist from China. It's such a great honor to be here and to be among all the speakers whose work I've been following closely for a really long time. So I'm a Chinese born and raised in China. I've traveled extensively across China, covered extensively on subjects that the West allegedly really concerned about, like Xinjiang, like COVID situation, and subjects that the West doesn't seem to really care about, like such as eliminating poverty. So today I hope to bring some aspects of those issues that are rarely being reported by Western mainstream media and their rising anti-China propaganda during this particular era. So in his latest speech at Stanford University, former US President Barack Obama said something very interesting. He said, it's not necessary for people to believe this information in order to weaken democratic institutions. You just have to flood a country's public square with enough raw sewage. You just have to raise enough questions, spread enough dirt, plant enough conspiracy theorizing, that citizens no longer know what to believe. Once they lose trust in their leaders, in mainstream media, in political institutions, in each other, in the possibility of truth, the game is won. So when he said those in the speech, he actually meant other people, other politicians are doing this to the United States. But man, feels like he was speaking from experience, because that's exactly what the United States has been doing to the rest of the world the entire time, with their media, with the NGOs, with the separatists they funded worldwide, throwing dirt, throwing conspiracy theories, negative information, sponsoring separatists, and cover revolutions, and eventually lead to a regime change that bring chaos to the country in the name of defending human rights of freedom. And they are taking those away from the people in those regions. So people, we need to look through their hypocritical faces and how some governments are giving themselves the seemingly most righteous justifications to do the most horrendous crimes towards people in other regions. For example, look at all the dirt and raw sewage they threw at China first. Some people from the West who have never heard about the terms like Xinjiang or Uyghurs 2 years ago suddenly became really concerned about the human rights of Uyghurs or Muslims in Xinjiang now. First, governments with the worst records of murdering Muslims directly and indirectly across the world suddenly really care about the human rights of Muslims in Xinjiang. Isn't that suspicious? Why do they only care about Muslims in China? Besides, where were they when the innocent, peace-loving Muslims and Uyghurs were murdered by radicalized extremists on the streets several years ago when terrorism was still ravaging China? So now, when there are finally zero terrorist attacks, when 2 million Uyghurs were lifted out of poverty, when Uyghurs can earn much more income, have better access to education, when their life is much more stable, the Western government suddenly jump out to say, oh, I care so much about your human rights, so I'm not buying anything you make. Actually, I'm also forbidding anyone to buy anything you make. Make you unemployed shows how much I care about your human rights. So all the facts show the population, all the data show the population of Uyghurs is actually growing. The economic situation of the whole Xinjiang is much, much better than before. And there are more mosques in Xinjiang than many Muslim majority countries. But still, the Western governments continue to throw sanctions on products made in Xinjiang. And those sanctions are not about reducing forced labor. What they're really doing is making locals unemployed, helping them to suffer financially and creating instability in China. I've made tons of videos showing the footage, the interviews of the people of all walks of life in Xinjiang. So I won't elaborate here since we have limited time. Anyone who is interested in knowing more about this subject, feel free to check out my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is the same name of mine, Li Jingjing. So I and several independent journalists have spoken out on this subject and also on the background of Russia-Ukraine crisis as well. And what we did is just providing the data, the background, the voices, the different sides of stories that were never reported by Western mainstream media or politicians. And you would think that since they care about the human rights of people in China or in other countries, they want to hear it. No. In the past few months, people like me and actually also several other guests at this panel, at this webinar, we got attacked by these media, mainstream media, like the New York Times, like the Associated Press. And instead of debating with us on the facts that we provided, this media immediately jump out, attacking us, putting labels on us, hoping to fewer people would hear what we say. I mean, on YouTube channel, I don't have a larger following, only 24,000 followers. But that small number is already big enough for both the NYT and AP to write about my channel, to write about me, and hope my channel to be banned. And that shows how little tolerance they have towards any voice that speaks anything positive about China or any other country on their enemy list. And that shows how little tolerance they have towards the people that have different opinions from their China bad narratives. But I also want to point out how weak, how double standard their argument is. Because one talking point they've always used to attack me or discredit me is that I work for a state-owned company, hence my voice is not trustworthy. I am working for a state-affiliated media, the CGTN, right now, and I've never hidden it from anyone. All my followers know very well what I do, who I work for, and that's one of the reasons they follow my channel. And I'm not even trying to ask people to blindly, fully believe whatever I say. What I do is just to bring people the stories, the voices that are neglected by Western mainstream media, let people to see different sides of the story so they can decide what to believe, come to a conclusion themselves. If after watching my videos, you still don't believe me, fine, that's your conclusion. But while they're attacking me as a state affiliated media, they have no problem believing and amplifying individuals and institutions that are funded by the US government. So most of the reports and allegations about Xinjiang come from this one think tank, Australian Strategic Policy Institute, or ASPI. This so-called think tank is actually funded by multiple governments, including the US State Department, UK Embassy in China, UK Embassy in Canberra, US Department of Defense, the Embassy of Japan, etc., etc. It's all on their website. You can find it on ASPI's website, so I'm not making this up. It's actually funded by multiple governments and the military industrial complex. And so are many individuals and organizations who are separatists. But these Western mainstream media have no problem believing and amplifying their voices when they are quoting those people using the research done by those institutions. These media didn't for a minute have any problem with their multiple governments funded background. So isn't that double standard? That's about Xinjiang. And let's talk about Hong Kong too. The West is so concerned about the human rights and freedom in Hong Kong, right? In Hong Kong, SAR. But you know how many people told me that they were many people from Hong Kong that when I went there, many people, local Hong Kongers told me that they're actually very strongly against what the protesters did. They're actually rioters. Rioters were destroying their city, ruining their daily life, yet they couldn't speak up because once the rioters know what they look like and they dare to disagree with the rioters would physically attack and threat them and their family members, putting their family members' information public online so they can cyber bully them too. And you know how many people were actually seeing how violent, how ridiculous some rioters were in front of their homes. And then when they go back home, turn on the TV and saw completely different things being reported by Western mainstream media. So why weren't the West concerned about those people's human rights? Why your media and puppets, your sponsor, don't give any freedom of speech to those Hong Kong people? So I think the West's propaganda skill is indeed outstanding, because if you think about it, if you look at the history, they are the ones that committed so many atrocities across the world towards every region, every race. They are the one that built their wealth by looting from the rest of the world. And they're still able to make themselves look like the beacon of democracy, make every evil deed they do look righteous. And yet they can make a country like China that is rising peacefully look like the evil one. So every country that has a different system or refuses to be bullied by the West look like the evil one. And that's one hell of propaganda. So now when the global South is united, when Africa, Latin America, the West Asia are having more economic ties with China, having a better relationship with China, instead of reflecting what they have done wrong to those regions or coming out with a better offer to compete, they'd rather just spend the money on creating negative news about China in those regions. I'm going to share my screen quickly to show you some news on my desktop. Okay, so are you guys seeing my screen? So this is a report from the Herald, a newspaper in Zimbabwe. This is, look at the title, US plan to discredit Chinese investment unmasked. So they found out the United States is sponsoring a strategy to undermine Chinese investment in Zimbabwe. By smearing Chinese companies are engaging in widespread labor malpractices, as well as violation of human, community, and environmental rights, among other ills. So this is the reports. If you can Google it later. So they find these people, United States, through the US Embassy in Zimbabwe, is training independent journalists to particularly write negative news about Chinese companies, about Chinese investments. One source said the training of journalists by the US Embassy is feeding into wider activities by Western countries to equip the media, civil society, and legal fraternity to fight the influence and growth of China in Zimbabwe. They're weaponizing anti-Chinese sentiment, as well as exploiting economic vulnerabilities of journalists. So there's a long article, and there's another one. Also on the Herald, newspaper in Zimbabwe, US, CCC, and local journalists gang up to foment chaos. So they are sponsoring local journalists to write negative stories at the same time, undermining Chinese investment. And actually, they are organizing some protests. They're scheduling an anti-government, anti-Chinese demonstrations that have been scheduled for May 26th. See, the local journalists find out this is what the United States is doing. Instead of spending the money on some useful things, they are just creating negative news on Chinese investment. I remember a joke that is told by my friend Daniel. He said, the United States is like your jealous neighbor. When he sees you build a swimming pool in your yard, instead of building his own, he decided to take a dump in yours. So when you're rising economically, okay, let's talk bad about him. So they are trying to put others down to keep themselves strong. So I think it's time for the West to reflect itself. You are not the center of the world. The global South has more population than the West. You can no longer tell people in global South what to do. Countries like China or countries in Africa, in Latin America, in West Asia, the rest of the world can decide what to do based on what's in the best interest for them. And I will end my speech with a few minutes of a speech from a retired colonel from the United States in terms of the threats of China or Russia that the West is so scared of. So I'm going to share my screen again. Here it is. This is a retired Colonel Richard Black, former head of the US Army Criminal Law Division at the Pentagon. So he works for the interests of the United States, not for the interests of China or Russia. And this is what he said about the illusion that the military-industrial complex created.
Let me just point out the illusion of Russian and Chinese aggression around the world. You hear this repeated many, many times that Russia is going to take over the entire world. China's taking over the world. They're doing all this stuff. If you look at the number of foreign bases between the US and the UK, we have about 900 overseas military bases, bases where we have troops stationed in foreign countries. The total bases of the Russians and the Chinese, about 35. China only has 5 overseas bases compared to the 900 or so US, UK. We've created this bizarre illusion because the war industrial complex must have enemies. You cannot manufacture weapons when you don't have enemies. And so we create this illusion that they're coming to get us, they're on our doorstep. And the fact of the matter is that China is out to make a buck. They want money. The Belt and Road Initiative is very important, but they have a different paradigm. Our paradigm is we go into a country, we set up NGOs, we take over, the government by coup. If we can't, then we just bomb the place to smithereens half the time. And you compare that with the foreign policy of China, which is you go in, you work with whatever government is there. You're not judgmental, but you make hard business decisions. You make investments, and I think for people who are comparing the foreign aid paradigm of the U.S. and China, they're saying, my likelihood of surviving is much higher if I follow the Chinese paradigm. We need to just get away from this feeling that we have to constantly be at war with the entire world.
Okay. The full video is like 4 minutes long, so I won't play the full video here. So anyone interested, you can find it, Google it on YouTube or on Twitter. And this is my speech. I hope you like it. And thank you so much, Radhika. I'm looking forward to hear other speakers' speech. Thank you.